Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where I talk about whatever the hell I want. And this time around, it's time to talk some more music on album analysis with Alex and Jim. Thank you guys both for coming on, as always, to shake things up around here and we talk a little music.
You are very welcome, Shane.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, man.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Alex. So, Jim, what did we listen to this time around?
We listened to Neil Young's Harvest, which was 50 years old last year. I picked this album because I'd just seen a documentary of kind of home video footage that Neil and people around him had taken during the recording of the album. And it's a super classic album. Everybody knows Heart of Gold. Like, I don't care how old or how young you are, like you've heard Heart of Gold.
Heart of Gold.
And yeah, it was like one of the first songs I learned on the guitar.
Wow.
I considered bringing my guitar on and like serenading you guys. Maybe Alex can do that for us. That strumming pattern though is iconic. But I don't think I'd listened to this album all the way through more than once or twice, maybe on vinyl. I know I own this on vinyl. Don't think it's my favorite Neil album, but it's probably the iconic Neil Young album. And so I figured it was worth talking about.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
know Alex also watched the documentary. Shane, you didn't, but that's okay. We have probably some takeaways for you.
I did, and the documentary was cool. I had heard these albums. I heard this album a couple of different times, and I had heard those songs like Heart of Gold and Old Man, and I know I heard Words and Alabama before. And I was like, oh, wow, these are just like these hauntingly beautiful songs. And the documentary kind of like has them playing the same songs and the same riffs like over and over again, but it sounds amazing. It sounds really good.
And not the songs you would think necessarily.
Right. Exactly. It doesn't really it features like some kind of woodsy version of Heart of Gold toward the end, but a lot of it, they were working on Alabama and Words a lot.
Alabama and Words and A Man Needs a Maid, which needs talking about, I think, in 2022.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is this kind of bottomless sort of, bottomless bowl of like, bottomless bowl quality to this album. Even though it's only 10 songs, each song kind of goes in these directions that feel very soulful. And maybe it's a bold statement, but for me, when I like hear other folk albums that come out after this, for me, I always think back to this, and I don't know if it's too bold a statement to say like it's the birth of folk pop, because I'm sure people don't think about it that way, but it is poppy. There's some very catchy, very thoughtful, songwriting hooks, but it also feels like it wasn't made for money either. It feels like it was just made feels very authentic. And he was only 24 years old when he's kind of like exploring these things. And I don't always know what he's trying to say. But it feels like there's a lot of wisdom, and it feels like there's a lot of soul in all of it. So that's why it just continues to resonate.
Yeah. One of you guys said in text message after I watched the documentary that Neil Young's been he's been 40 years old for 50 years, basically.
Yeah, I think that was me.
Sometimes
that definitely wasn't
sometimes
me.
he comes across as a 20-something, and sometimes he comes across as a really wise human being. Yeah, I think the album, there's a lot of longing and searching in this album.
Yeah.
And upon listening to it as a whole, I kind of found three Neil flavors. And Shane, I do want to get your general thoughts, but so like the orchestral pieces, I don't like them. I don't like them at all. There's the acoustic Neil, which has really stuck. Like those are the songs that people remember. Needle and the Damage Done, Heart of Gold, the what was the other big one? Old Man. Yeah. Old Man, yeah. And then there's the rocker, and I didn't realize there was as much electric on this album as there is until I was watching that documentary. But yeah, Shane, your turn.
I'm gonna give a little background here. So I was never the biggest Neil Young fan growing up. I've been a huge Lynyrd Skynyrd fan for most of my life, and Neil Young was not a liked person in my household, especially because I definitely got my love for Lynyrd Skynyrd from my mom, who also hates Neil Young like a lot. So it's growing up in a very conservative household and not really being fans of certain artists like a Neil Young, who's very outspoken about things. And you have songs like Southern Man and stuff like that that's just like, it's right out there. But and it's funny because like I tried to justify when I was younger reasons why I shouldn't like their music too, and like I complained that his voice is whiny. And like I had the whole, well, to be honest, I don't think Bruce Springsteen's the greatest vocalist out there, but like I was like, oh, I hate Bruce Springsteen because he can't sing. Tell a story though. But the thing is, like listening to this, which I literally just listened to this before we started recording, because side note, I always like to prep these because like I drive to and from work and I listen to music all the time doing it. I'm like, oh, I can listen to these albums and stuff. Thanks, Joe Rogan. So I can't listen to Neil Young on my Spotify. So I like threw on YouTube on my TV before this and just sat down and listened to the album. I was surprised by the different flavors. Like I was not expecting like orchestral music on this, and I'm like, that's odd. Like I think kind of like from a vibe standpoint, because a lot of this album feels very chill and mellow from like musical standpoint. Like it fits, it has that kind of feel to it, but it just feels weird. It was unexpected, to say the least. But I've definitely heard a couple of these songs. Like I've obviously heard like Harvest and Old Man before. I've definitely heard Old Man before. Side note, there's this band that they're still technically putting out music. It's called Red Light King. And I remember they put out their first album that got played on MMR all the time. There's a whole bunch of songs from that album that did, especially like Something for the Pain and Bullet in My Hand. But they covered Old Man. And like it's kind of their first album has some like a bit of rapping in the vocalization. So it's like somebody kind of rapping the song Old Man to then sampling every time Old Man's like, and it's Neil Young being like, Old Man, look at my life. And just like that cuts in every so often into the song. But, I like his music. It's beautiful music. And like a song like Old Man and like Harvest and stuff like that, I really liked. I like from just listening to this album, I really like the song, and like Heart of Gold, obviously. And then like Alabama stuck out to me too, because it had different vibe than some of the other songs too, and I liked it. I'm glad that you brought up the different flavors, because there definitely felt like a couple of different flavors on this album. And still in hindsight, still weird that there's like orchestral stuff on here. Was not expecting it. I'm like, is this the Moody Blues?
Yeah, I feel like the Moody Blues pulled it off a lot better, and this hasn't aged. Those two songs, "Man Needs a Maid" and "There's a World," I don't think they have aged as well as some of the other acoustic songs. I don't know if it's like just how orchestras were recorded in the 70s, or I don't know, but Moody Blues are a good example of a band that used an orchestra really well, and it still plays well, now.
Well, like their music's so complex and layered and stuff like that, and they really committed to like that feel. I feel like the orchestral songs on this album are like Neil Young doing Neil Young best. Like I feel like Neil Young's at his best doing something like Heart of Gold and Old Man and Harvest and like those kinds of things. It feels very genuine,
right,
to me.
Yeah.
What was the name of that band, Shane? Sorry, Alex. What was the name of the band you
Red
said
Light
covered?
King.
Because I'm gonna make a note of that. Go ahead, Alex.
Red Light King. So I agree, and that's what was like my first mental note, was that the orchestral stuff feels like it should be on a different record. However, I love "A Man Needs a Maid." Like I love that song.
No,
that song cracks me. First of all, it cracks me up. It's the first time he goes into that chorus, And I don't know. I really there's a lot of desperation in it. And there's just something beautiful about it. I just really dig that idea. I don't know what he's trying to say. Maybe you guys can help me with that. Maybe he's trying to say that there's a helplessness to a natural helplessness to an adult man where he needs some taking care of, even though he should be able to take care of himself. Maybe that's what he's trying to say. But there's just a desperation about it that I just like, and I just think it's funny. And so, but I will say I think it's the second verse, something about him watching a movie with a friend and there was a female character he could relate to. It's kind of a dumb verse. I'll just put it right out there because I know everybody looks at it like, oh, Neil Young, great album, but it's kind of a dumb verse. I'm just putting it out. That's just a dumb verse. What's he trying?
I thought when I listened to the album like a month ago, whenever I picked this, I was willing to be generous about the message, and I was like, oh, he's saying he can't take care of himself, and I think that is the heart of it. Like he can't take care of himself, but I don't think there's any redemption for like the way he puts it. He wants a woman to come cook his meals and then go away, but it does fit with the album. I think he's so out on the weekend and Harvest, he's like in Heart of Gold, he's searching for a lasting connection, and yet at the same time he's like, I want my space, I need my space, and I don't want to be smothered, you know what I mean? So I kind of get where it's coming from, but
right.
And I do think it's more about himself than about women in general. I don't think Neil Young is a chauvinist. I think he's honestly, I think in spite of all the hate, he has a lot of friends, and the documentary played into that. Like he was still on good terms with Stephen Stills and Graham Nash. James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt are singing backup on Heart of, and I don't even hear James Taylor at all.
I wouldn't hear James Taylor.
No,
yeah,
I can't.
I could hear Ronstadt, and Shane. I don't know if you knew that Crosby, Stills, and
Nash and Young.
Yeah, they were all doing background vocals on different songs. I think Alabama and Words, right?
There's one more.
That does not surprise me at all after watching like Echo in the Canyon, where it just felt like that whole entire experience just felt like one big fluid musical movement with people. And it's just like, yeah, like I just went across the street and was like jamming with Graham Nash and just like coming up with this song. It's just like, my God, can I imagine like living on a street with like a whole bunch of screenwriters? It's like, I got like this idea for this movie and just like vibing with each other.
Right.
And it's funny. It's interesting because like it makes a lot of sense. They obviously didn't invite David Crosby a whole lot. That's a if you want to watch a very interesting documentary about somebody who tells it exactly like it is and does not pull punches about himself, that David Crosby documentary that he did about himself is itself
Wow.
like he
Dang.
does not mince meat about it. It's like I was an asshole. I burnt every single one of these bridges. I did this to myself. And it's just like, good for you. It wasn't like there's that one documentary that Robbie Robertson did about the band, and like the whole entire thing was just like, yeah, they were all the problem. I'm just like, oh, okay. So it's tough. I love rock documentaries, but you really have to be mindful of who's making them, and stuff like that. But it's really interesting with all those different kinds of collaborations. I love Linda Ronstadt, also love James Taylor, and it's just like just that experience of having all those creators and stuff. I do want to mention one thing because I'm looking up the song "A Man Needs a Maid," and apparently he does. There are literally two maids in the song. There's
Oh,
supposed to be like an actual maid who comes in, cooks for him, cleans up after him, and leaves, and then him referring to the new woman in his life as a maid.
Hmm.
That's at least according to what this says here. So I think that is indeed confusing if that is the
So
case.
real life people, you're saying there were two real life people that the song was based on.
Well, no, it's just like there's in the song, there's two different uses of the word made. One's a literal
Okay,
one, and then
right.
I
one's
see what you mean.
him talking
Right.
about the new relationship that he has. So,
I
like,
think
at least that's what it says. I think that is confusing.
I think I'm predisposed to dislike this song because I pride myself on my independence. Like I cook for myself, I clean up after myself. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I don't like the generalization, I guess,
Yeah.
of a man being like, being helpless. But he's like, he's a genius. I don't know if you guys want to argue that point. So like, maybe he can't take care of himself the way most people would.
I don't know. I never explored it enough. I never really thought of, but didn't think about it enough. But I always felt like it was a metaphor. So one of the love languages is acts of service.
Mhm.
So maybe it's that idea that this person is cleaning things out for me that I can't clean out myself. Um, that's just kind of. But at the same time, some of the lyrics are so on the nose that you have to laugh because he could very well just be saying, "I'm a famous musician now. I don't have time to clean up after my own shit." There, going back
And
to what you were saying about Jim, him needing space. He found his space. He really
Mhm.
did, but he must have had a lot of a 24-year-old. I'm imagining there must have been a lot of pressure on him, as a young, you know, now one of the most famous musicians in the scene that he was in. There must have been a lot of pressure. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure. That's one. So one takeaway from the doc is that it features the Broken Arrow Ranch a lot, and it seems like he really enjoyed being there at his ranch, and he had a sense of peace there. But there was one thing he said about the reason he liked being there is that he didn't have to be famous there. He could just be himself because
yeah,
he was super famous, especially after the CSNY thing. maybe all because of the CSNY thing. I don't think he was, well known before he joined that super group.
Well,
But
because he was in Buffalo Springfield.
And that
that's
had
true. That's true. So he was, yeah. So it was a retreat for him. It was a safe space for him. So that ranch, I think, being, having your own space, even at 24, I think that informed the songwriting on this album a lot.
jealous.
Just need to Neil Peart it sometimes. Just be like, I don't like being famous. Leave me alone. And that's the thing. Not everybody is up for that whole craziness. And there's obviously rock stars that ate up every single second of it. But like, I don't get the vibe that Neil Young seems to be the kind of person that loves to eat up celebrity. Seems like an awkward, weird kind of guy that just
Not celebrity, but I'm sure he loved the respect that came with being, thought of as one of the greatest songwriters of his generation.
I imagine
of all time.
I can imagine maybe he really appreciated the respect he got from his colleagues and stuff like that, and that kind of making a difference, because obviously he cares a lot about his music and bringing a message with his music, because
it also gives him an autonomy that other artists don't necessarily have.
And Neil Young can make whatever the hell he wants. And it's one of those kinds of things where you've gotten to this point and you could write about whatever you want. You can make whatever music. It's just like any great artist, whether you're a filmmaker or you're a musician, and you've gotten to a point where it's just you could just keep making the greatest hits of what you did and just keep enjoying it, eating it up. Or you could continue to use what you have and the status that you have to keep making statements and keep pushing the boundaries of what you do. And he definitely seems to be the kind of person that would rather do that than just, go in, play the greatest of Neil Young and kind of call it a day.
Is there another song? No, go ahead.
Is there another song? What now? Rocket in the Free World? What were you going to say?
No, that one keeps popping into my head. I was going to say, is there another song from this album that resonates for either of you that you feel like you have to kind of talk about? It's if it wasn't on the album, it wouldn't be the same.
Oh yeah. I'd say there's 3 or 4 of those. But so 2 things. To Shane's point, Lynyrd Skynyrd was not the only band to pick beef with Neil Young over his country phase. I think you were saying try new things out. I read I think it was John Fogerty or CCR. It was a book about the band, I think, but there was a lot of John Fogerty in it, and he spoke very disparagingly about Neil Young and his country phase. He didn't take it seriously or something.
Well, it's coming from a guy who sings about the bayous from Northern California.
Right. I didn't like Alabama. Until I saw the documentary, which is funny. So I liked A Man Needs a Maid a lot less. I never want to hear that song again after watching the doc. And I like Alabama more. I felt like Alabama was just a rehash of Southern Man. But there's a line in that movie where he says that Alabama was really just a song to himself. And Alabama just sounded good. So he's addressing himself. He is Alabama in that song. I thought that was really cool. So I like that song more after watching the
timeline. And maybe Shane, I don't know if you know, didn't Southern Man come after this album?
No, it came before with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Southern Man that was a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song?
Was it?
I thought it was, but I could be wrong. Do you guys have computers?
It came out on after the gold rush in 1970. So
So it is before.
Yeah, and then
oh, you're right. Okay.
Second Helpings come out. I feel like that was like 73, 74, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm gonna double check that.
My bad.
When
I
that
was
Leonard
wrong.
Skinner album came out. Because that was on their second album. It was 74, so it was like 4 years later.
Oh, it's 4 years later when they addressed it.
Well, because the thing is, like, Leonard Skinner didn't even release an album
right
until at least a couple years after the Gold Rush even came out.
Got you.
I think it was just like he obviously pissed off a lot of Southern people.
Right.
And like especially because like it's some Canadian guy coming in and just being like,
sure,
your country sucks. You're doing
that's still a lot.
shit.
That's still a story that a lot of people don't know, though. Like when they don't think about the lyrics, and you young will remember, "You Southern man, don't test around." Like they
Well,
don't
and
even
apparently
know.
they didn't even have like some kind of grudge with each other or anything about it. It was just like it was a response, and
Right.
it
Yeah.
fit into the. I think it just fit into the idea of what they were trying to go for in Sweet Home Alabama. It's just like some people around here don't like Southern people, and it's just like we don't care. I don't know if it was like particularly like spiteful, and like obviously they mentioned Neil Young's name because like I'm pretty sure Southern Man's probably the most famous song to like come at Southern Americans and stuff like that.
Right.
But like the Southern United States, but like apparently uh Ronnie Van Zant and Neil Young didn't have any bad blood with each other.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you both got a great song out of it. So there you
go. Yeah. Classic song. Great songs. It's true. Yeah.
And if they can respond to each other, on the vinyl, then in person, maybe there doesn't need to be any bad beef. In response to Alex's question, yeah, the three songs that like live in my heart are probably the ones that have really stuck out from the album on radio, Needle and the Damage Done, Old Man, and Heart of Gold. That's not to say that there aren't other good songs on the album, because I think there are.
Yeah.
But I think those three, they have a lot of that 40-year-old man wisdom in 24-year-old Neil Young.
Sure.
That has it's aged well. You can play on the radio right now, and people can relate to searching for a life partner. They can relate to it's about heroin, right? Needle and the Damaged Son is about heroin. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, every junkie's like a setting sun,
And Old Man might be the most interesting song on the album to me.
Yeah. So I think that goes with the endless quality. I think those songs really feel timeless. They really do feel timeless, those ones. Yeah, for sure. And the way they sound too. Something about Heart of Gold, you mentioned the riff, but the guitar tone and the way that harmonica sounds, I've never heard a better harmonica in my life. There's just something incredibly real that comes through the speakers, It's just and I don't know if you guys noticed. You probably noticed it on like CDs from the 90s and stuff, but I don't know why. For some reason, I noticed it with this. Heart of Gold is turned up. I was listening on Apple Music, and they dialed it up. I don't know
really?
if that
up to 11.
Maybe the harmonica or just the whole track.
I don't know if next time you listen to it, when you go from track 3 to track 4, you might see what I mean. They do that a lot. That might have been a record company thing, but there was like an extra mastering thing that went on there, because the rest of the album felt a little slightly faint. Like I had to really turn up the volume to get some of the songs where I wanted them.
That's why it's so important with like mixing and stuff like that, and listening to something on like the best speakers that you have. That's my one thing I don't like about listening to the music in my car is like if I'm really trying to get like the most full experience, I'm driving around a 2004 Acura and speakers are kind of beat. So like
Right. Yeah.
it's
That's
not
true.
like the most like I honestly really like just throwing on if I have the record, throwing on my record player and just kind of experiencing it that way because like I have a vinyl collection. But like it's very interesting. Like I just looked up Old Man and apparently it was inspired by the man who he bought the ranch from, the old
Really?
caretaker, and like comparing like
Yeah.
what's an old man's life to a young man's life, and
Hmm.
because like you both have the same needs and that need to be filled in certain ways. Like obviously you have different experiences and the young man has a lot less time that they've lived, but it's still a matter of to what extent is this person different than me. And it's interesting because not only did James Taylor apparently do vocals, but it also says he played banjo on
Oh,
Oh, okay.
I've read that.
it.
An
I've
old
read
man.
that.
That's
I
great.
was expecting to see him in the documentary. I did not see James Taylor, but we do meet the old man in that film.
I'm not sure I remember that.
There's one scene of them. I think they're standing in front of a truck or something like that. Um, he
Hmm.
might speak Spanish. Might have been his first language. I don't
Oh,
remember if that's true or if I got the impression that it was like his foreman or his caretaker for the ranch. But
okay.
if he bought it from that guy, that would make sense too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that song is really cool because it shows like a key component of wisdom
Yeah.
is knowing and acknowledging the fact that you don't know so much, right? So to me, old man is him asking the old man for advice.
Mhm.
Like, I'm so much like you were, and I'm so lonely, and I'm looking for this heart of gold, this woman, and he's like asking and open to advice. There's a willingness to listen there, and yeah, I maybe that's the coolest thing about that song that I recognize.
Yeah, that's a classic one. And I think was it Beck just did a cover? He just released a cover of that. I think he did a whole album called Old Man. I don't know if you heard it. Um, yeah,
I did not hear it, but I
yeah,
will put that in the notes.
yeah. I hadn't listened to the whole album, but I did listen to the single. That was the single. This was the
Mhm.
cover of Neil Young's Old Man.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's the standout for me, but I don't know about you guys. What's I don't know, is there a favorite song? Is there a standout? Was there a surprise track from this album?
I definitely Heart of Gold, but Alabama and Words. There's something great about Words. I think Words is the one where, you know, the tempo changes. Yeah,
Yeah,
has all those
yeah.
tempo changes. I really like that. Because songs don't do that a lot. Like people don't do that, and they really pulled it off. It was very cool. It kind of like it stops, it slows down into a jam, and then it picks up again when he gets into the lyrics.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of haunting, and yeah, words between the lines of age,
That
right?
was the lyric that I wrote down. Yeah.
Yeah,
Words between the lines of age. It's a really great closing
Mhm.
track for this album because it has all the themes, I think, in it. And it also is like a nice balance between acoustic Neil and electric Neil,
right. Yeah,
you
you
know?
still, even though there's electric going on, and you remember in the documentary there was, I think, someone playing slide slide guitar or slide sitar.
Yeah. Shout
Oh,
out to shout out to Ben Keefe on slide guitar because
yeah,
Heart of Gold is not the same song without his slide
yeah.
guitar on the harmonica is great, but it's not the same song without that slide guitar.
I think that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I appreciated most about this album is like it doesn't come off being like an album that sounds very complex, but there's so much going on in it there's so many different instruments, there's so many different sounds. And like I feel like you could just kind of write this off as like it's a folk album and stuff like that, but like it's just everything that they layer into each of these songs is very different and interesting. And like you have slide guitar, you have harmonicas, you have banjos, you have all these different kinds of things in each of these songs. And I think that's the kind of thing that could set something like this apart is the little things. And it's why like people could listen to the Beach Boys and be like, I love this surf rock. And then you actually listen to them like, holy crap, what Brian Wilson's doing on like song like Good Vibrations is such a famous song. And then you think about how complex that is. And you're just listening to them like there's so much going on in this song. And I feel like Neil Young's music on this album is one of those kinds of things where you could easily just get lost in like, oh, I know Heart of Gold, I know Old Man and stuff like that, and not really appreciate what's really going on with it. And honestly, I think I will have to, because I only did get to listen to this once. As of right now, I feel like sometimes it's hard to listen to an album that you know some of the songs from for the first time and have other ones stick out to you. It's like, oh, there it is. I've been waiting for that one. But like, I imagine like listening to this a couple times because there's a couple of them that stuck out to me a little bit. I appreciated the first couple of tracks on it that really sank in with me. And then, you get to like Old Man and Heart of Gold towards like the middle of it. And then you get a couple more songs to wrap it up. Because like the last song on it's what, 6-something minutes? Which is very different than the whole rest of the album. Because everything else is between 3 to 4-ish minutes.
That's the thing. It's not a long album.
I think it was 37 minutes when I pulled it up on YouTube. Back in the day when I could throw in a record and be done in 35 minutes. It's like you throw in like an old AC/DC album or like a Creedence thing is like, bam, 30 minutes, done.
Yeah, it's a sharp contrast to other stuff. Like, are you guys familiar with Like a Hurricane? Might just be called Hurricane.
From the Scorpions?
No, it's off of my favorite Neil Young album, American Stars and Bars.
Oh, I'll have to look at that one.
And it's either the closing track to side A or the last track on the whole album. I don't remember which one. But I would just play that song over and over into headphones. And that's so good. And it's really different, is my point, in that it has these meandering guitar solos. It's like 8-10 minutes long. I don't know how long it is. And I think it's more towards the Crazy Horse stage of his career.
Okay.
But these songs are all very concise,
right,
very lyrically, melodically centered, you know what I mean? So this is not the Rockin' in the Free World Neil Young that we know and love today,
That's why I use the word pop, and I always hesitate to use that word. I remember someone, who I collaborated with wanted to use that word to describe the music I was writing, and I was like, don't use the word pop.
Don't you dare.
But he was right, because there was obviously a pop element to the way the hooks were. And in this, I definitely hear, like I could hear John Lennon and Paul McCartney going, "Oh, that's a great hook right there, mate. Yeah, that's really good." Like there's an obviously like songwriter. This is a song that I want you to be singing for the rest of your life. Like there's an obvious, whether he intended it or not. I think that there's a confident young man there going, I got a song. Like there's a couple of those on here. It's like, oh shit, he's got a freaking song. He's got like a damn good song here. And so that's pop. That's the pop world. That's the world that generates hits, that generates songs you can put in movies that people are going to listen to time and time again. And that's what this album has. Yeah, no, it's far from perfect, but it's also kind of, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to stop hearing things in it, I'm going to keep hearing new things in it. And I do want to say before I forget, and it's kind of ironic that I know that you guys aren't high on Mad Needs It Made, but it does have my favorite lyric in the song. It correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it should, to live a love, you have to give a love. To give a love, you got to live a love, you've got to be part of, and that's, I don't know. I just thought that was like, wow. I wish I had that in my DNA when I was 24. It's a good.
Is that him realizing that, like, the commitment aspects of a lasting relationship, and he's just not willing to do that yet?
I don't know. Yes, maybe, maybe he's trying to learn. He's learning like what that means, to be part of. You have to play your part. You have to give attention to this person and this thing. You can't just sit on the couch and coast. You can't just lie naked in the bed. I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's interesting because, like, he was 24 when he did this, you said?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I appreciate most about doing this show with both of you is both of you 100% have a much more refined, like, grasp of music than I do. And because it's like, I think about when I was in my early 20s and, like, the films that I like watch, especially before I got to college when I was a teenager, and like how different my taste in film has been and how much that's grown. It's funny because, like, I still listen to the same music that I did because it's like still throwing my AC/DC. And it's interesting because, like, I've tried actively more often to venture out into more music because, like, to be honest, I still just listen to mostly 60s and 70s music. So it's like I try to listen to some newer stuff, and it's interesting because, like, sometimes it's like I've never heard of some of the bands that we've talked about on here, or like I've never once sat and listened to an actual Neil Young album before listening to this. So I appreciate getting the chance and, like, getting to chat with you both about it. And I'm also someone, like, when I'm just listening to music, I'm tending to just listen to the music and not really think about the lyrics as much and stuff like that, which my wife tries to ruin songs for me all the time. And it's just like, did you know it's about this? And I'm like,
did you know Pumped Up Kicks is about murder?
She did that with one of Jim Croce's songs. It was a Bad Leroy Brown, right? Bad Leroy Brown.
Well, I feel like that one's pretty straightforward. It's like if you even just half listen to the lyrics about it, he's just telling a story about a dude who's not a great guy who winds up looking at the wrong man's wife and getting for it. But it's so much fun because that's the thing. Right. It's such a fun, jaunty song, and it's just like, now dude's dead on the floor.
No, it's a lot of fun. I'm sure you can't play any Red Hot Chili Peppers when she's home. She'll just ruin every Chili Pepper song.
She would go out of her way to ruin every Chili Pepper song for you. So try to avoid it.
Did I tell you guys that I saw Jim Croce's son play live, like, not long ago?
Dude,
I did.
No, you didn't tell us
AJ Croce. And it was pitched to me as Jim Croce's son plays Jim Croce. But he's not that. He's very New Orleans. Like, he doesn't sound the same, Sure. But he did play a bunch of songs. Bad Leroy Brown was one of them. Yeah. It was fun. He had the drummer from the Steve Miller Band there. I guess that's cool.
Sure.
Maybe I bet he gets paid more by AJ Croce than he did by Steve Miller.
Probably does. I wasn't too hot on the set. I appreciated his original stuff. He's like a piano player, like New Orleans Papa what's his name? Papa John? No, that's the pizza
Dr.
guy.
John.
Dr. John, thank you.
Yeah.
He's very much like in the same vein as Dr. John.
That's interesting.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's a very different.
I
That's a very different vibe than his dad. Then
very different. But God,
Very
talk
different.
God,
about
time in a bottle.
Mm.
Gets me every
Okay.
time.
Great,
Like,
great song.
well, I pride myself on leaving lasting impressions on people. And when my wife and I weren't together for 3 years, apparently she could not listen to Time in a Bottle because she just would think about me singing it to her and just be like, yep, ruined that for you. But now it's good again. So it's okay. She still cries though.
It's interesting. I saw Sunday Morning News, CBS Sunday Morning, one of my favorite shows, which I'm usually not awake for. They did a piece on AJ Croce. And, I don't think he knew his father very well. He was very young, and, his father, he was probably going on tour and everything. He didn't know his father very well. So
he wasn't old at all.
Isn't AJ Croce blind? Correct me if I'm wrong, dude.
He is not blind, but he apparently he was like the protege of some blind piano player.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't know why I thought he was blind, or he had a childhood accident where, I don't know, maybe I merged two stories into one or something. But
and if he is blind, he moves around the stage really well.
Okay.
I had no idea.
He should be in the Olympics, man.
He told some stories about like blues men that he played with and hung around with. Ray Charles, like he met Ray Charles.
Wow.
And he did wear sunglasses on stage, but I did not get the impression that he was blind. But I'm now intrigued to do a little Google search.
There you go.
There you go. That's cool. No, I could be way off on that, but no, that's really cool. I always, when I hear Harvest, I hear a little bit of old country, a little bit like old country, what you would have thought as old. When I hear a lot of Jim Croce stuff, I hear like folk country, not the country pop that we became accustomed to in the 80s and 90s, but I hear old folk country.
Well, I just watched, there was a Showtime just wrapped up a mini series it's called George and Tammy.
Okay.
And it's George Jones and Tammy Wynette. And Jessica Chastain plays Tammy Wynette and Michael Shannon.
Well, he's one of the best. I love him.
He can sing.
Oh, wow.
Why did I not know this? And like the two of them are fantastic together in that. And honestly, I'm sitting there like, I want to listen to some damn country, but not like country music today. Like, I'm pretty sure the only country singer that I listen to today is Chris Stapleton. But like,
is he really a country singer though? He's more of a blues singer than a country singer, isn't he?
It's an interesting way to put it. Not wrong. Like,
well, remember the two are not disconnected. The two are definitely interrelated.
Correct.
Blues is definitely missing from country today.
Like most. You said George and Tammy is the name of the show.
George and Tammy.
That's a good show.
Okay.
Yeah. I appreciate that stuff. I do. And I appreciate when you're like, look, I mean, ultimately, look, regardless of what the instrumentation is, regardless at the end of the day, if you have lyrics that are going to speak to people, and you have a style of writing your songs, that's going to really resonate with someone, whether it's Kendrick Lamar, whether it's freaking, Chris Stapleton, Garth Brooks, whether it's Tom Petty or James Hetfield, it's going to resonate if it sticks with somebody's heart like that, and all of a sudden they're getting a tattoo of the lyric, or like, it doesn't matter, it's going to transcend the genre, and so these are people we're talking about. A lot of them are the ones who like transcended the genre, and the genre is important, but it doesn't take the place of the fact that that person just is, they're an author, they're a songwriting author, and they get these musicians together, great musicians, right? And they know how to use them to make the best record and to make the best song. And that's where the real magic happens, because you meet a lot of musicians out there, really good, talented people who either can't write a song, or they, maybe they wrote something, they haven't written something in a long time. So that kind of becomes the art. Everybody can contribute to it, even people who don't play an instrument. Even somebody who doesn't play music can contribute to that art in some way, shape, or someone like yourself, Shane, can contribute to it because you've heard this many bands, you've heard that many bands. And so you can point people in, and then you can go, well, I can point someone in a direction this way, or I can write, I can't play an instrument, but I can write lyrics and have this idea for a song about a zombie or something like that, so that's what makes the art so much fun, is there's this, it's uncertain. It's really uncertain, but it's also really exciting. And I don't know, the people that like idolize, who are able to do it at such a level, it's like going back to that endless inspiration. It just continues to inspire you. And I don't care if it's AC/DC or Shania Twain, or it's not Shania Twain.
Going back to that bottomless bowl thing, right?
Yeah.
I will say that Shania Twain could probably not get away with covering "A Man Needs a Man," but Chris Stapleton could.
Yeah.
When you can sing like that, you can sing anything. People are gonna listen.
It's really sad. I can't think of Shania Twain without thinking Shania Twain, and that's because of Larry the Cable Guy and all the blue collar comedy I listened to growing up. Ruined it.
I think Ron White was freaking hilarious.
They call me Tater Salad.
He's freaking hilarious. That dude he doesn't care.
They all had very, very different shticks and different ranges of redneck.
Yeah. I never listened to the other. I'll have to just give their whole special a shot someday.
But I know we haven't decided our next album, but I think it's Alex's pick, so we'll leave everybody in suspense on what we're going to talk about next month. But I appreciated this one. Got to listen to my first ever Neil Young album all the way through and enjoyed it. But Alex, Jim, thank you both, as always, for coming on and talking music.
You're welcome for your first Neil Young listen.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.